Hey, hi, hello, ladies. How's it going? How's it going? Hope you're doing good. Hope you're doing well. Me? Well, I'm doing all right. Thanks for asking. Today, I want to talk about the NOFX documentary that I was so lucky to be able to see down there in Austin, Texas during the premiere. So now that all the drama has kind of settled, I can kind of sit back and just talk about this film a little bit. But before we do, my name is Dan Frampton, all one word, the O's a zero. I am the internet's most ruthless gatekeeper, and today is all about NOFX yet again. So I'm gonna need a like and a subscribe from you. If you got a couple hype points to send them my way, scoot them over here. And right now I thought I would record this video in the bowels of a ship. I am the captain of this pirate ship apparently, and we're just gonna talk about NOFX inside a pirate ship. I thought that was a good idea. I'm not sure if it is, but here we are. Now, one thing I want to say before I start yapping about this film is I am not a film reviewer, okay? I don't normally talk about the merits of film. I'm also not typically a globetrotter or a traveler. So all of this sort of stuff is gonna frame my review a little bit. I'm inexperienced in the ways of all of this. Now, typically in my private life, in my personal life, I'm not much of a film enjoyer. I'm sorry, I don't really watch a lot of documentaries. I don't really watch a lot of blockbusters. I don't really watch a lot of A24 indie prestige films. None of that sort of stuff. Film has just never been something I've been deeply interested in. Sometimes there's a movie I'll watch. Other times I might partake in a film. And it's kind of strange because I studied film in school. I went to school for animation, and if you want to study animation, well, you have to study the techniques of film and then apply it to your drawing. That was always a very blind spot for me, not gonna lie. Not much of a film connoisseur. I do like music, and NOFX were the bridge band for me from radio punk rock to underground punk rock. So watching this movie probably would have been something I would have been interested in my regular life. So I'm gonna do my best to try to talk about the merits of this film, my enjoyment of it, and if you should see it if it comes to a town near you. Because this thing, the movie, the NOFX documentary, 40 Years of Fucking Up. See, I haven't even said the title of the movie yet. That's how inexperienced I am. Or what? Already a couple minutes into this thing? This movie was called 40 Years of Fucking Up, and Fat Mike, the lead singer of NOFX, says he doesn't want to release this on streaming. This is not going to go to Disney Plus. You're not going to be able to get this in physical media or anything like that. What he wants to do is he wants to run this like the Rocky Horror Picture Show or something like that, where it runs annually in a couple theaters and you make a big event of it. But I do think the Rocky Horror Picture Show still is available on streaming, but it also operates in that theatrical release kind of model that Mike wants to do with 40 Years of Fucking Up. So I'm not sure the best way to find out if this movie is playing near you. Maybe go to the 40 Years of Fucking Up Instagram account, the NOFX Instagram account. I don't know where they're telling you where this thing is playing. I'm the internet's most ruthless gatekeeper and a comic book artist. I have more things on my plate than keeping up with how NOFX are promoting their movie. But I did just tell you how they're planning on releasing their movie. So I don't know, do what you will with that information. Alright, so let's talk about this movie, I guess. I'm not gonna go through this scene for scene. It's been 2 weeks since I've watched this movie, and I didn't take notes or anything, so I'm going off the dome a little bit here, but the movie did start with that Howard Stern clip that most NOFX fans would be familiar with. It's a clip from the Howard Stern show where Howard Stern is being shown NOFX for the first time, and he's unimpressed. He's just like, it just doesn't rock. This stuff doesn't rock. I'm sorry if you like these guys, but these guys are going nowhere because their music doesn't rock. I'm sure I've even clipped that thing in a YouTube video that I made on this channel. So it was kind of a cool way to start the movie because at the start of this band, back in the 80s, NOFX were not a good band. They were barely even a band. And the movie just starts off with a bunch of really famous punk rockers coming in to tell you how bad NOFX was at the beginning. You had members of the Offspring, Descendants, Pennywise, the list goes on. I can't remember them all off the top of my head, but they all came in to tell you that NOFX was really bad at first. And what NOFX was at first was the meeting of Melvin and Mike. This started off as a story of two best friends starting a band together. Two best friends who had an interest in skateboarding and rock and roll music that went out and did it themselves. And this runs very parallel to how I ran my life. I had a best friend. I started a band with them. I went out there on the road with no money. And I know a lot of other people out there can relate to this sort of thing as well. And when Mike and Melvin met, they made a point to really emphasize this black flag skateboard. Now, having a piece of iconography, maybe a symbol to represent this era, would prove to be good in the storytelling of this band. Keep in mind this black flag skateboard. Mike and Melvin, best friends in the 80s, bonded through skateboarding and punk rock music. And it's crazy the amount of old archival footage that is in this film. Apparently, Mike and Melvin both had just like bins and bins and bins of storage of VHS tapes that the director of this film had to go in and sift through. And to be honest, this movie probably could have been like a mini-series, just given how much footage that they had. So after the film goes through the very early days of the band, like them finding each other, them getting out there, them going on their early tours, it goes through Smelly's heroin arc, because apparently back in the day, Smelly was quite the junkie. And there's a story of a magazine, I think it's the Rolling Stone, and they came in to do a piece on rock and rollers becoming junkies again. So in order to get this story, apparently this magazine, this publication, I think it was Rolling Stone, gave Smelly $350 to do with whatever he wanted. And of course, a junkie's gonna junkie, and he got some junk and he started shooting it into his arm. It was well documented and it was in this magazine, and Smelly's mom saw it. It was very devastating. It was devastating to his family. It was devastating to the entire band. It was just a really bad look, and it was going really poorly for the band at this time. So what the band did is they had an intervention with Smelly, and they got Smelly clean. And now keep in mind the importance, the emphasis that was put on this part of Smelly's career, this part of the whole NOFX arc, because drugs would take an even bigger role with the band a little bit later, but not so much right now. In the early days, Mike was apparently just drinking a bunch, not really doing the hard stuff. Mike was a business-minded man. Mike went to school, Mike got a degree, Mike applied all of his smarts to his band, and then once his band got good, and once his band started making money, and once he was like secure in what NOFX was, well, then he started doing drugs. It says he didn't start doing drugs until he was about 31 years old, and that is an insane decision. And this is where the film kind of loses me a little bit, because on one hand, they treat Smelly's heroin addiction like it was bad and dark and one of the worst things that the band could ever go through, but then it treats Mike's addiction like it's just part of the day. And Mike seems to justify it with the thing that a lot of addicts say: it's not ruining my life, so why would I quit? Back in the day, those drugs were ruining his life, and they had to stop. And to be able to come at this from that privileged of a viewpoint is not something that a lot of people can relate to. You're talking to the 1% when you're saying stuff like this. Like, if you have the resources to be able to deal with the addiction, and the addiction can be managed, and you have all the money for it, to get the safest stuff, to never have to resort to any of the sketchy things that people with less money and less resources would have to do just to be involved in that hobby, I guess I'm gonna call it. So I think like the look at the drugs that the band uses comes across as a little bit disjointed here for me anyway. But I will say it's open, it's honest, it puts it all out there on Front Street. Anybody watching this is gonna have an opinion about it. And to me, I found it to be pretty sad, I'm not gonna lie. I was just like, oh no. Every time Fat Mike went down to rail a line, take a bump, I was like, oh, you poor soul. There's so much more to this world than that. And he has everything at his fingertips now that he's a millionaire, now that he has the mansion and the pool and the closet full of things that he loves to have. He can do so much with his life. He doesn't have to do this. It breaks my little heart. I found it so sad. Now, speaking of his closet, he goes through all of his fetish stuff, and I love this about Fat Mike. I absolutely respect this to the millionth degree. Because yes, he wants to be open and honest about everything. That includes his drug use, that includes his toxic relationships, and yes, that includes his fetishes. But his fetishes aren't even in the same category as those other things. The fetishes, to me, are an example of Mike really embracing who he is at his core and not being ashamed of any of it. And he put on the masks, and there was this scene of him getting whipped while answering questions, you know? And that's all fine and dandy, but to be honest, I don't like to be an involuntary participant in anybody's sexual activity, and watching Fat Mike get whipped while answering these questions made me feel like, oh man, this guy's getting off on this right now, and I'm watching him, and I did feel a little bit strange in that moment, even though I'm very happy for him embracing that part of his life. Just me sitting there being like, oh no, I'm watching Fat Mike get turned on right now, and I feel uncomfortable. And to be honest, I feel like that in 99% of situations. If somebody's getting aroused around me in a non-intimate scenario, I find it to be a little weird. Like if I'm in a cafe and somebody's just casually scrolling the hub, I'm like, oh man, I'm not enjoying my time right now. But it's not like the whole film was like that, and it was kind of played for laughs. But I'm just trying to describe my emotional roller coaster when watching this movie. But then comes the most uncomfortable part of this movie for me, and that is when Fat Mike finally decides to go into rehab. And rehab in his mind was going to M. Shadow's house. Now M. Shadows is the lead singer of one of those metalcore bands, Avenged Sevenfold, Killswitch Engage, I don't know, one of them. It's Avenged Sevenfold, I'm just being a little bit of a Sly Cooper. But it's in M. Shadow's house where things get really graphic, okay? Now Fat Mike is 2 days off of drugs and his body is going through withdrawal. Now, none of this is actually explained in the movie. The way it's framed in the movie is I stopped doing drugs and then I just started puking and pooping blood everywhere. The moral of the story is do drugs. That's kind of what you get from it. And to me, that's sloppy storytelling. Like nobody's actually going to see that and be like, oh, get this guy back on the drugs real quick. But that is the way that it's framed. It's like Fat Mike needs his drugs, and if he doesn't get his drugs, he explodes all over his friend's house. And the fact that there's video footage of it, the fact that Fat Mike was like, oh my God, I'm bleeding all over M. Shadow's house right now. Roll it, lights, camera, action, I think is fucking insane, dude. Like this guy thought he was dying and he was like, I want this documented, but made for really uncomfortable viewing during this whole documentary or whatever. So if you wanted a myriad of emotions, my God, this film is gonna give them to you. Now keep in mind, I said I'm not a film person. I am very much an art person, and keeping all of this in from an artistic perspective is genius because you are feeling emotions. If the purpose of art is to resonate, connect, and make you react, this movie does that 100%, especially if you're a fan of the band. But I would love this film to be in the hands of non-NOFX people, just film viewers, just documentary enjoyers, the average general public. I would absolutely love their perspective of this movie because Mike wants to keep this pretty much contained to the NOFX people. So his fans can celebrate his band and keep it very much contained. And he's in a very good position because his band has a lot of fans and that could actually be a sustainable model for a guy in his position. So even though he's open and honest and presenting all of his life unashamedly, it does come across as brave, but also like he's just an open degenerate, a confused open degenerate. Like he's battling this thing in his mind. Like I'm still a punk rocker, I'm a fetishist, but I'm also a millionaire and a ton of people rely on me. How am I gonna make my life work? And honestly, to be a kind of person that has to balance all of that sort of stuff, I couldn't even imagine it, dude. Because not only did Fat Mike have NOFX, he also ran that label for a lot and had to deal with a ton of bands. And he did it all while being a degenerate, but he also had all of his values in line in order to keep that train on the tracks. And a big part of this movie goes into the final tour, the farewell to NOFX. And basically what Fat Mike told us was he didn't want to do it anymore, but he felt kind of bad because he had enough money to live for the rest of his life, but the rest of his bandmates didn't. So one final tour to make the rest of the band millionaires, and then he could bow out gracefully. That was the whole plan, and it worked. They did it. They put together this like 2-year tour kind of thing. They got all the money from everything, the parking, the merch, the whatever, and he was able to put all of that cash in the members of the band so we could walk away and feel okay about it, knowing that they're okay. But the movie also definitely goes into the drama that happened between Melvin and Mike. A lot of these tensions that found their way into the band find their way into this film. Because apparently during this entire farewell tour, Mike did not want to play with Melvin. And Mike not wanting to play with Melvin was the actual catalyst for him wanting to end NOFX completely. I'm not here to go all into the drama of what's going on with these guys right now. There happens to be some personal tension and some business tension going on at the same time between these guys, and it breaks my heart because these guys were the two best friends that started this band, and that's why it resonated so hard with me, is because like I said earlier, I had a best friend that I started a band with, and I wasn't fortunate enough to have this kind of career with them, right? But I absolutely know how it feels to have that kind of sentimentality with another person surrounding a creative process. And for me, I lost that person. I was out there on the road, on tour, in that band, when we suffered a car crash and I lost my Melvin. So to see them at the end of their tour, knowing how much the band meant to both of them, but how far apart they are at the end of it, just killed me. That part ripped me to absolute shreds. There's a moment in this movie where Fat Mike is writing the farewell song, kind of like the farewell theme song of NOFX, I guess, where he's basically telling the story of all this sort of stuff, and he wants it to be the last song that they play ever. So Mike is telling this story, how much it means to him, and he mentions the Black Flag skateboard in it. Now, during the rehearsals of it, the song sounds awful, nobody's on board, it's a very tense and arduous process, but by the time they actually play it live and it's presented in the film and Fat Mike utters the phrase Black Flag Skateboard, well, that's when I broke down like a little baby, because I have a guy that I did this with. I know how much it means to me. I know what the symbols and iconography does to not only how you see your band, but how you see yourself. A lot of your identity goes into these little things. So to see Fat Mike be that sentimental artistically, but then on the other side, not be able to find common ground with the same person that's in the band, that best friend that it's all about, where that sentimentality just simply wouldn't exist without, it is a heartbreaker. And there are so many heartbreakers in this movie, but the rift between Mike and Melvin is one that I can personally relate to, and I hate to see it because they're both alive. I used to have fights with my Melvin. His name was Dean. I had insane fights with him running up and down streets, and I'm just so thankful we got to resolve all of that stuff before it actually came to a permanent end forever. These two best friends are still alive. These two best friends had a crazy legacy together with this band, and at the end of it, they can't talk to each other unless there's lawyers involved. I hate it. So it was the love of punk rock and skateboarding that got this band together, and it was the drama between those two guys that inevitably broke it up. This thing was always the story of Mike and Melvin. So this film kind of exists in so many different parts of my brain. On one hand, it's a wonderful celebration of an insane career. On the other hand, it's a sad, tragic, heartbreaking story of best friends turning into enemies, with just way too much drug use and enabling going on. But by the time the movie is all said and done, it looks like Melvin is out there doing life coaching and doing his kind of thing and being happy with his family, and that part I love to see. Mike is very, very busy with the co-defendants and the punk rock museum and keeping his whole empire afloat. He's still actively doing that. He's just not a member of NOFX anymore. And you got Smelly and his surfboards. He loves, I don't know what you do to surfboards. Do you wax them? Do you sand them? I don't know, probably a little bit of both. He's doing both of those things, I guess, with surfboards. I don't know my way around surf culture, and I really should, given how stoned I am all the time. I'm just not much of a West Coast kind of guy, meaning I've never spent any time over there whatsoever. I'm from the East Coast, and nobody surfs over there. The waves aren't surfing waves on the East Coast. Moving on to El Jefe, he also has a post-NOFX life that seems fulfilling. He's acting a lot, getting roles in TV and film, and he's also a member of the Aquabats, but NOFX will always mean more to me than almost any band out there on earth. They were the band, them and Rancid, that got me from the Green Day and Blink-182 on the radio to the punk rock underneath all of that. I wouldn't have found Minor Threat if it wasn't for NOFX. Their cover of Straight Edge, that got me into hardcore. If I'm talking about my journey in this subculture, NOFX is one of the very first bands, one of the most foundational elements in my whole journey, if you can even call it a journey. I just listen to music, I don't know. Now, all of this review so far has been straight from the heart. I made a couple bullet points, but no real script. The next part is something that I did write, and I just want to read it here real quick. This is a Buddies Drift Apart story, and a band bio, and a farewell celebration. As much as the film would benefit from focusing on telling one of those stories, it would have been a disservice to skip over any one of those elements. Balancing those elements from a storytelling perspective would be very difficult, but saying all that, the film does suffer a little bit and feel a little bit disjointed, with all of these through lines weaving in and out underneath one another. And that's another reason why I say this could have benefited from being a mini-series. They had enough back footage, and there were 3 or 4 different through lines that could have been specific episodes. So that's my biggest critique of it. And that critique leads into the next critique, and that is that this NOFX story, it doesn't really feel like a satisfying end to me. It feels like Mike was the only one that really wanted to make this happen. Mike was the one that wanted to move on. Mike made the plan to make everybody a millionaire, and because Mike did that, he feels okay to walk away from it. Meanwhile, everybody else is like, yeah, the $1 million is cool and all, but but I'm the drummer in NOFX. I would like to continue being the drummer in NOFX. And that takes it back to the whole identity portion of being in a band. The Mike and Melvin drama doesn't really go into great detail here, and it also feels super unresolved. They just kind of tell you that there's tension there and you want a little bit more of that juice. The film and the last tour put a final nail in a coffin that in my mind only had a sleeping person inside, if that makes any sense. It makes sense in my brain. It's the actual existence of the movie, the premiere of it, and the rollout that makes it feel finished, not the movie itself. It's Mike opening himself up in this sort of way that makes it feel completely done. So it's a wild ride, as some people would say. It's a roller coaster of emotions, as I heard other people utter, and it really is all of that. If you're a NOFX fan, you're gonna get a lot out of it. If you're not a NOFX fan, I really want you to see it and tell me what you thought of it. Those are my thoughts, and since this is a review, I know you're gonna want like a numerical value at the end, like a score or whatever, and I didn't really give that any thought. Am I gonna do a letter grade? Am I gonna do stars? Am I gonna do thumbs? What would the ruthless gatekeeper use as his metric for rating something? I've decided to use stars, okay? So this thing is gonna get 3 3/4 stars out of 5. 3 3/4, that's pretty solid. Okay, I promised the film review of 40 Years of Fucking Up, and that was it. Thank you so much for watching. All right, if you were also down there in Texas, or if you're in the premiere in California, I wanna know what you thought. Sound off down below, and until my next upload, watch another upload. Okay, goodbye, see you later, and have a good one.